I'm super happy to see Top Fuel, Funny Car, Pro Stock motorcycle so healthy. And I think that we're seeing the NHRA really lean into that, right? And who could blame them? I don't know that it can even be argued that Nitro sells the tickets, right? I mean, you can see it when people leave the stands. I will admit I was surprised on multiple occasions this past weekend in Gainesville how full the stands were for Pro Stock, how full the stands were for Pro Mod.
They
right?
were, yeah. I think we saw less of that exodus when
Yes,
field classes,
which is really good. Yeah. But I do think we have to kind of ask ourselves, like, we're in a going green area, right? It could be argued that this is a wartime period, right? We're fresh off a global pandemic. Electric vehicles are coming. I saw an ad on television last night for a brand of electric vehicle that I'd never even heard of. I'm going, these things are coming out of the woodwork. I mean, you've got foreign
Polestar.
I saw, there's European nations that are saying in 2023 or 2025 they're going to ban the sale of internal combustion engines. I mean, vehicles with internal combustion engines. I mean, we're in a wild time. So I have to ask myself, long-term thinking, and that's never something that I'm super fond of, right? I like talking about the here and now, but long-term wise, I mean, I just get a little bit afraid of the NHRA because we're in a heady moment, putting all their eggs in the Nitro basket and kind of turning a blind eye to Pro Mod, because inside that competitionplus.com article, and, I consider Ned Walliser, I can't think of his job title, maybe off the top of your hand, but he's high up, obviously. Director of competition at the NHRA. There's a quote in there that, the NHRA sees a bright future for Pro Mod inside of the NHRA. And I found that interesting, because I think that they're going to be challenged to prove it. That's my... I can't count how many times
they're
as a business owner.
They're going to have to.
I can't count how many times as a business owner I've had to invest, and I've had to invest before it was a surefire thing. I've had to stick my neck out, sign the dotted line, borrow money from a bank, whatever. I've had to stick my neck out and roll the dice because I believed that something had a bright future, right?
But that's where they're dropping the ball.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, they're going to have to,
and that's not just in them having to invest. That's maybe get your staff out, go sell more sponsorships, get more companies on board.
Well, I'm going to follow that.
That's always been on the backs of
that's what we have to do.
Guys.
But that's what we have to do, in our business,
and that's what most
we have to sell more advertising. If we want to go to more events, if we want to go do this, if we want to have a race, we got to come up with sponsorship money.
There's a couple things,
and they need to do that. Like it's ridiculous. And I know I talked about this with you guys before, but it's ridiculous that there was a golf tournament this weekend down there that had a $20 million purse, and Cam Smith that won it got like $3.5 million, and here we are like,
pay $1,500 to race for $5,000.
I mean,
and I mean, listen, I understand that we're comparing.
These are professionals though.
Yeah.
You're telling me you can't go out and sell the NHRA to someone with the stands packed like they were last week, and you can't go to a company and go, look, you're going to get this.
You can, and NHRA does within their
enough
core classes.
Though.
Their core classes,
not enough.
Pro Mod is something they treat as you come to us with all the goods.
It's still not enough across the board, though, Mike.
No. I agree with you totally, but we're talking about Pro Mod in particular, the way they treat it differently, that the racers have to come to them with the funding, with the representation, and that's what they lost with RPM.
I think Mike's right. Like, or JT, the point you make is valid. Like, I understand we're comparing apples and oranges when we're talking about like the PGA and NHRA, right?
Yeah,
but still,
but you're right. I mean, and I'm telling you, if any
NHRA has to treat Pro Mod that way. They have to go out and sell it as part of their package,
because what happens when inevitably, in my opinion, I mean, we actually had a discussion on here last week with Freddie Terza from VP Racing Fuels about just the complexity of acquiring nitromethane. I mean, they produce the stuff in the United States, but you can't get it to go racing, right? I mean, we have to import nitromethane from China to support our hobby that we have, labored over for decades about how expensive it is and how hard it is to, I mean, holy crap. I mean, think about that. So my opinion is just that when I hear somebody say, we believe that Pro Mod has a bright future inside the NHRA, I'm immediately wanting to challenge them and say, prove it.
Right.
Show me,
they're gonna have to
prove it to me that you believe. Because I'm telling you, man,
your pie's this big, you got to give them a slice.
You got to give them a slice. And especially if you don't want to find yourself 10 years down the road, like caught with your pants down, because these are uncertain times, right?
Pro Mod, it's been uncertain until now. And when the core classes were struggling, Pro Mod, I believed, helped keep that deal afloat as far as interest and
I know for a fact that it was important to track owners. I know for a fact that it was important to track owners because I've asked them. I called and asked, and they said, I mean, there were track owners that flipped out when Pro Mod wasn't on their list because they knew that they could probably get 24, 30 high-level cars. And again, people don't understand that it goes beyond the on-track product. That's 24 to 30 tractor trailers in your pits. That's 24 to 30 more teams for your fans to go watch wrench on their cars. And like, it adds to the entertainment value. It adds dramatically.
There were some popular guys at that time too. You know, like they had a big fan base.
Well, that's also, think of a Charlotte, Virginia, Atlanta, Bristol, the tracks that are around here. This is Pro Mod country. Those guys want Pro Mod in their national event.
100%. Like, I don't think Virginia Motorsports Park would have a race without Pro Mod. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there are some of these that it's a pass fail. I mean, it is a pass fail. I don't think you could have. I don't think you could have the NHRA Gator Nationals and not have Pro Mod down there. I mean, it'd be a problem. We asked, and we bumped into a lot of people. And Mike and I were actually we talked about, had the weather been nicer, and we thought about it a little bit earlier. We should have hired some college kid or something to stand at the base of the tower, or stand at the base of the grandstands and just poll fans, like political polling, like poll these people, ask them what they like, why they're here, who their favorite driver is, to get a little bit of data about what these people think and feel about stuff. But anyways, the time is now, because if the NHRA doesn't want to catch themselves in another situation where they've only got 8 Top Fuel cars touring the country, or they've only got 12 funny cars, or whatever the case may be, and funny cars looking better than it has for a while, but it's still not, we're still not seeing cars coming out of the woodwork necessarily, right? I mean, it's still a pretty, what are there, 22 funny cars on the planet or something like that? How many Pro Mod cars are there? And I mean, I know that people perhaps get tired of hearing me say this, but man, you've got a real foundation with Pro Modified. I mean, there's like 150 at least cars in the country right now that with relatively minor changes could be running NHRA Pro Mod. I mean, there's a ton of these things. I mean, they're everywhere. There's all these different series that exist for them. There's all these different shootouts. There's all these independent races that go on. I mean, there's a lot of options and a lot of places for a guy with a Pro Mod to race. And they're way less expensive than a Top Fuel team, right? I mean, we've had Clay Milliken right here on this show say that, you can go run at a championship level in Top Fuel for $1.5 million. Well, you can field 2, 3, 4 Pro Mods for that probably, right? I mean, and I think if the NHRA has if they really believe that Pro Mod has a bright future within the confines of that oval, that red, white, and blue oval, the NHRA, they're going to have to prove it, and they need to now, because I hope they don't wait till they've got a problem in those other classes to start paying attention to Pro Mod again, because that's what I feel is happening. 100%. They paid attention to Pro Mod when they needed Pro Mod, but now that they don't need Pro Mod, they could give 2 shits less.
It's become this headache that they don't want to deal with, because Pro Mod it's a tough class to manage. We've
probably
already seen that
the
with
hardest
the different combinations and just the personalities of the racers that choose that path. It's a tough deal to manage, and it's been like raising a wild child or something up to this point.
I mean, I want to see the NHRA to take money from someone else. Like, right now it pays $10,000 to qualify in Top Fuel in funny car, right? I mean, if you qualify, you're going to get $10,000, and that's great. And I don't really want to see that change. But I mean, there was a lot of rumors headed out of 2021 into 22 that NHRA, and I mean, listen, I'm not trying to air out anybody's dirty laundry, was looking for ways to spend money, right? Because they had better years during COVID, during the COVID-19 crisis than they thought they were going to have. They pulled back in all these places, made cuts with their workforce, right? Reduced purses, pulled back on this, pulled back on that. And then at the end of the year, they go, holy shit, we guess we got some bread we got to get rid of. We got to do something with. Man, let's get some of that bread headed towards those guys parked down in the gravel and the swamplands and with their race car, with their Projects on plywood. Let's put some purse money towards those guys, because I don't know, you're not going to convince me that you believe anything good about this particular brand of drag racing if you're not willing to put some skin in the game, to get invested. I mean, at the bare minimum, I don't think it would be too much to ask to see all the entry fees go toward the purse. If you can't come up with a sponsor, I get it. I get this. It's not easy. I mean, people think it's easy, but it's not easy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of pressure. I mean, you guys know the pressure that at various times we've felt to live up to our sponsorship obligations. And, you know, it's a tough deal. I'm not ever going to say that it's easy, but man, you could really get this thing headed in the right direction if you just took all the purse money, or excuse me, entry fee money. And you want to see guys stop talking, stop complaining about what the entry fee is, put them in a position to get it back. Right? I mean, you would have had 16 cars this past weekend, $1,500 a pop, guys. Simple math, $24,000. That was more than double. Well, not double, but that was almost double what was put up for sponsorship money for the event. I mean, you could have had a pretty damn good drag race with $24,000. You could have put 10 grand up to win and paid back a little bit. And I think you would have had a whole lot of people pretty damn happy. But when you take that $24,000 and say, hey, we got to earmark this for administrative fees and paying this and paying that, it heads in the wrong direction in a real quick.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, like, listen, when you throw these numbers around, it's just nuts to even think about.
Let me read this post by Steve Matusik, who a longtime Pro Mod racer, member of the RPM, a group who is no longer involved in the class, but he's treasurer of SEMA now. Used to be president of Aeromotive, guy that really knows his stuff. Obviously, I don't have to tell you his qualifications.
We're going to have him on the show in a couple of days here.
Yeah, he read this article, and his reaction to this quote. And while those participating do pay an entry fee of $1,500 per race, those costs go into operations associated with running the class. That's what you just said, Wes. His reaction of that is, let's break down that cost. When Pro Mod isn't racing from NHRA, who from NHRA stays home? So what increased cost do you have at NHRA by having Pro Mod there? How many employees did they hire for Pro Mod? What is the incremental cost and materials, supplies, etc.? I'm not saying NHRA shouldn't make money, but don't lie about the costs associated with running the class. The purse, as well as 100% of the gate from spectators coming to see Pro Mod, is pure profit. NHRA cares about the revenue the class puts in their coffers, not the class. Sorry to say this. So,
I mean, to be honest with you guys, it's very difficult to argue with, right? And I'm an optimistic guy, and I don't want to. I mean, we're not trying to be negative, and I want to preface, like, I wish I would have said this at the beginning, but I'll say it now. Like, this is all coming. Even Steve Matusik, that's coming from the best possible place. It's just, we really do care. Like, we really, really care about this particular type of drag racing and we know the potential. We see it. We see that it isn't taking street outlaws. They're not having to run nitro from China to put on a show, right? They're not having to do that. There's proof. There is proof right now that you can entertain a crowd, you can sell tickets, and you can put on a show without nitromethane, right? And pro modified cars are that vehicle. There are cars that they are passenger vehicles. They still look like cars. It's a 69 Camaro versus a 67 Mustang. It's a new Corvette versus a new Camaro. I mean, we had so
more than one person
layers.
Tell us that outside of the fuel classes, people were there to see Pro Mod. We had
more than one, and high level guys that we had this conversation with.
Yeah, tell us that. Hey, yeah, I think as many people are here to see Pro Mod as the fuel classes. Now, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but his point was, outside of the fuel classes, this is the most exciting class, and this is what people are here to see.
So you start thinking about door cars covering the quarter mile in 5.5 seconds at over 250 miles an hour. We're still racing a quarter mile. I mean, there's a lot of positives. I mean, we have cars from all around the world. I mean, I get frustrated, guys, because you look at Pro Mod, what more can you ask for? I mean, we got a guy from Brazil, right? Sidney Frigo. We got a car from the Middle East, right? We got, Khaled Al-Balushi out here from Dubai, right? I mean, we've seen drivers from all over the world participate in this single eliminator, travel to America to participate in this brand of drag racing. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Pro Modified is the universal language of drag racing. I believe it's the only form of drag racing that is truly successful on a global scale. Like, there is great drag racing going on in the Middle East. There is great drag racing going on, Pro Mod drag racing going on in the Middle East. There's great Pro Mod drag racing going on in Australia. There's great Pro Mod drag racing going on in Canada, right? I mean, there's great Pro Mod drag racing going on damn near on every street corner here in the United States of America, the good old US of A. This is an incredible thing. This is a moment in time that we're going to regret letting go of. We're going to regret letting this fire fizzle. In 2019, the quarter mile Pro Mod deal was the hottest thing in drag racing. You had people building cars, buying spots from one another. I mean, at one point in time, you basically had to agree to sponsor a race or bring a sponsor roughly $20,000 to even get to race. Right. Now these guys are showing up to races and nobody's paying. I mean, the only thing being paid is entry fees and nobody knows where that money goes. It's a really troubling situation. And I'm challenging the NHRA. You know, I understand heavy is the head that wears a crown, and you guys have a lot, you know, I don't envy your position. I really don't. And I get it. A lot of people to please, a lot of people to try to keep happy, a lot of balls in the air. I get it. I totally get it. But if you're going to say things like you believe there's a bright future for Pro Modified within the NHRA, I'm going to need you to prove it. I'm going to need you to show me, because I think there's some quick and easy fixes. I really do, man. I mean, I was going to challenge you guys to go around the room here. Like, how do we fix it? How do we get Pro Modified back to the shape that it was in 2018 and 19 when we had more cars than we need? And I got to tell you, I mean, if you could make these guys, if you could put a little bit of money in, if you could demonstrate that you're willing to invest, I mean, what if it wasn't forever? Can you imagine how well received it would be if the NHRA came out right now and said, hey, on the heels of the conversation that's going on and the weekend that we had in Gainesville, and recognizing what the bright future that we want for Pro Modified inside the NHRA, we're going to take all the entry fees for the remainder of 2022 and we're going to put that into the purse fund. We cannot promise, or we cannot commit to doing this forever, but that's how we're going to prove to you that is the quickest and easiest way the NHRA can tell these racers that we want you here.
It's a goodwill gesture.
It's a goodwill gesture.
It shows the faith. You know what this reminds me of? And I don't want to get too political here, but if I've been fought, you know, if you, everyone knows the war in Ukraine, the Russia deal, and we've got the Jen Psaki is the White House press secretary who does the press conferences every day, and they ask her, why can't we produce more gas here at home and drill more here at home? We all know this is a very complex subject. Right. Her answer is always, there are 9,000 oil and gas leases available to companies to start drilling right now, and they refuse to take advantage of them. And at face value, that sounds like a good answer on her part, and maybe it is in their camp. But if you do digging on that, first off, there were 40,000 leases, you know, under the previous administration. They've cut it to 9,000 since they've taken office, and there's tons of red tape associated with those. Long story short, the gas and oil companies don't want to take on those leases and make those investments because they're on the hook. They're on the hook for if it goes bad or if it profits. And under the current climate, they're not willing to take that gamble. And exactly what we're seeing here in Pro Mod is no one is willing to take that gamble and build a car to invest in funding an operation to go Pro Mod racing when there is so much uncertainty around how NHRA is going to treat the class. So again, when they say one thing as far as where this money goes or the investment, or they see a bright future, you know, behind the scenes, until we see a goodwill gesture or something of good faith, or that NHRA truly cares about where this is headed, I think you're going to see that same reluctance from these teams to commit to it.
Especially because there's a couple things that I think we need to touch on, and I want to remind everybody, a huge shout out to all of our sponsors here on the Wes Buck Show. Stroud Safety over my shoulder right now, our good friends at flowracing.com. Get your subscription right now, flowracing.com/drag illustrated. Elite HP, Sand Haulers of America, and the most recent member of the family, Redline Synthetic Oils. Thank you guys so much for your support and belief in what we're trying to do here in the sport of drag racing and for the sport of drag racing. There's a couple things that I think are worth talking about as far as this subject goes. And as we kind of wrap up today's show, and I appreciate your guys' time, it's been a lot of fun to have like kind of a really deep dive conversation. These are the type of conversations I love having on this show. It's great to have a bunch of guests, but man, sometimes I just want to really get in there and like dive deep. And I feel like that's what we're doing today. One of the things that I immediately thought about when I thought about administrative fees or whatever is whatever that entry fee is supposedly used for, if they would have added like, and that's, hey, that's how you get your TV time. We're going to add you to the Fox show or whatever. We're going to have a special 5-minute segment during our Fox broadcast.
What it goes to.
Yeah, or say, hey, we can't stop charging this $1,500, whatever. It's inside of our business model or what. I know how those things work. They've already got that money earmarked or whatever. It's already spent. But if they could find a way to say like, hey, you're going to have to pay $1,500 a race, but now you're going to be on the main Fox broadcast. You're going to be on Big Fox. Now, we can't show every round of racing, but we're going to do a tight, concise 5-7 minute type of thing or 4-minute thing, whatever. I understand there's a limited inventory of time during one of those shows, but give something back. Like you're saying, Mike, give some sort of goodwill gesture, something, make an investment. If you can't make an investment financially, make it in pomp and circumstance, make it in exposure, right? Make it in parking, make it in scheduling. You talk about uncertainty. Do you realize these teams this past weekend, most of them are 1,000 miles minimum from home, right? They spent all this money. Their truck and trailers buried in mud. They've had to, as we talked, go to Home Depot and buy blue tarps and plywood to park on, right? Their shoes are ruined. Their clothes are ruined. They're miserable. Porta potties are full because the pumper trucks are filling up, pumped full of pond water. I mean, rough weekend, especially if you were down there on the grass, right? Can you imagine what it would have been like to be a J.R. Gray, a guy who's made a massive investment in Pro Mod drag racing, really kept Mike Janis racing out here, whenever Mike had a health incident that pulled him out of the car. I mean, we've got the Bahrain 1 team, Stevie Jackson, Justin Bond, Kyle Belushi, a 3-car operation, right? You got Ricky Smith back in the fold, bringing a new face into the class, and Tyler Miller. I mean, you got Lyle Barnett out here that's like probably one of the best and most celebrated and beloved stories and characters in our sport, right? They were told, I believe on Saturday, if you guys don't run by 5:30-ish, if we don't get you guys run by 5:30, you're not going to get to run. Right? I mean, they had to hear that. I mean, at one point in time, they were saying, hey, we're going to run your first round of qualifying Saturday morning at 9 a.m. And then we want to bring you guys back up at noon and run first round. And it's like, man, you guys are really just going to trying to get rid of us, right? You're just trying to get us out of here. You're just trying to get us down to 8 cars or get it down to a smaller program. And I get that part of that has to be done, right? I mean, you got to run the cars. You got to get people sent home. You got to do it. But damn, man. I mean, you talk about, okay, you're going to charge me. You ain't going to pay me. And now you're going to tell me you don't know when I get to run. I might not get to run. And if I do get to run, I'm probably going to have to run at 9 o'clock in the morning, probably be the first cars down the track, probably going to wreck my shit, probably going to have to race in front of nobody. My TV show is not going to be on for 2 weeks, if at all. Like, have we checked a single, I got to do $20,000 worth of upgrades to my car to even be here to race that I wouldn't have to do if I wanted to race PDRA, Northeast Outlaw Pro Mod, NMCA, Midwest Drag Racing Series. I can go race anywhere else and not have to do that stuff. But to come race here, I got to, right? But I want to run a quarter mile and I want to run against the best in the world. I want to run in front of big crowds. I get it. But man, you are just, I think they're
making it hard.
They're making it hard. You ask those racers to come all the way to you. And you've got to make one step to get to them.
Right.
Just make that one step, one good faith gesture, one show that we hear you, we care, and it will start to change. The momentum and the perception and everything will change. And you can't, it's like a game of chicken. No one wants to make that move.
And it's
or whatever,
funny because I think that's what we're at right now. Which is going to come first?
The racers to do
the chicken or the egg. And I think because I think that, I mean, do they believe that like getting a sponsor is going to fix everything? I don't think a class sponsor is necessarily going to fix anything. There was a class sponsor the last 2 years and all these same things were happening. You know what I mean? And I know that there's a lot of things we can point at. I mean, inside the competitionplus.com article, I believe Stevie Jackson a handful of times talked about how, man, they kind of let the Pro Charger combination run away with things. There were some parity issues that didn't help. But my thought on that is those things are easily skirted. Like you're going to have those situations and have happened before.
That's Pro Mod. It's going to happen again.
It's going to happen again.
That literally is Pro Mod, is managing these various power adders.
So I don't think that's a valid, we can't point to that because that's always the case. I mean, before it was the Pro Chargers, it was the turbo cars. I mean, before them, it was nitrous cars were fast, blower cars were fast. I mean, then it was the Hemi-headed cars versus the wedge-headed car. I mean, there's always been that, right? There's always been that. There's always going to be that. One of these combinations, parity, by all accounts, I mean, in my opinion, is an illusion. I mean, what you're trying to do out there is you're trying to create the illusion of parity. You're trying to make it look like there's a level playing field, but there's so many variables. I mean, there's variables in the same combination. I mean, Racer A with a roots blown Hemi and a 2,650 pound Pro Mod, he may not be willing to run the rods out of his car the way Billy Stocklin and Stevie Jackson are. Same exact combination, same weight, probably make the same power.
Show on parity, but if you look at in these crazy ass conditions we had at Florida, the parity was pretty good. You look, I
think so.
I think they've got it, and we have lauded NHRA and their tech department over the last couple of years. They have done an excellent job for parity outside of this Pro Charger deal, but I think they've worked to get a handle on it. It wasn't easy and it was expensive for these guys. And I think that's what Stevie's saying is the problem when it comes to attendance and racer and car count. But as far as when you look at this number, I'm looking at the summary of eliminations right now in Pro Mod. This is a damn good show. And it was competitive throughout. All combinations had a car in the hunt.
I really think I was talking earlier about Pro Stock in a lot of ways, I think stealing the show, but man, Pro Mod, for only being 16 cars there, whatever we lacked in quantity, we sure as hell made up for in quality. I mean, it was the quality of the show was fantastic. I mean, we didn't have, there wasn't a lame duck in the mix.
People want to, this is why when you look at this and we talk about that, it's a shame that it's in this position of poor health. And so I think the passion's there. The enthusiasm is there. Obviously, we're passionate and enthusiastic about it. That's why we've just gone off into a major